But Chuck Connors stood 626 and played the perfect TV father for 5 seasons. Millions of families trusted him. But behind the camera, something darker was happening. The young actor who played his son later admitted he felt isolated and unsure of himself on set. One comment from Connors cut so deep it stayed with him for decades. And then there were the scenes themselves, moments of violence so raw that parents wrote letters. A body count so high it shocked researchers who counted years later. What audiences thought they were watching was never the full story. The real version was always there, hiding in the frames. Sam Peckinpah sat with air-ejected script in his hands in 1958, and instead of letting it die, he shaped it with the same stubborn fire that had always pushed him. The Gunsmoke team thought it was too rough, too sharp around the edges. So, he took it to Zane-Day Theater and watched it air on March 7, 1958. Viewers reacted so strongly that the story grew wings almost overnight and turned into The Rifleman. Suddenly, Chuck Connors, standing tall at 66, stepped into the life of Lucas McCain, a character who carried strength in his voice and pain in his silence. Peckinpah's script had once followed a man with no family. But when producers suggested giving him a son, everything clicked. One quiet suggestion changed both the tone and the heart of the story. And by September 30, 1958, the new series had its first episode on air. It ran all the way to April 8, 1963, delivering 168 episodes that kept growing out of the same spark that started from a simple rejection. Peakleways reached back to the land that raised him, and North Fork kept calling him long after he left it. Born in Fresno in 1925, he grew up hearing the stories that hung in the High Sierra air. Both sides' Ophi's family had settled in the region in 1884, and the name Peckinpah was Tieto places people could point at on a map. His grandfather Charles owned the sawmill that stood on the mountain, now officially named Peckinpah Mountain. Summers meant wide ranch land and the smell of cattle because Peckinpah's maternal grandfather, Denver S. Church, ran a 4,100-acre ranch and served as a judge and a U.S. congressman. Sam's father worked there as foreman. So Sam learned to ride, shoot, and listen to old voices talk about the West that was slipping away. The area around North Fork, Corsold, and Base Lake still held the last breaths of the 19th century during the 1930s and 1940s, and Sam soaked it in without knowing he was storing material for the stories he would someday write. Those early years shaped Mark McCain in ways most people never realized. Peckinpah carried memories of an absent mother in days when he and his brother escaped school to work like cowboys instead. He poured pieces of himself into the boy who relied on his father for everything. Sam had spent much Ophi's youth being raised by grandparents because Furniture Pika drifted in and out, leaving the boys to grow around the land, the animals, the chores, and the quiet discipline of ranch life. When people watched Mark McCain grow beside Lucas, they were watching echoes of Phoebe Sam once was, learning to harden and soften at the same time as the world around him shifted from its Wild West shadow into something less romantic and more uncertain. Before The Rifleman was even a show, its future was already being shaped by the people who helped bring its pilot to life. On March 17, 1958, the Zane Grey Theater aired The Sharpshooter, and there stood a young Dennis Hopper playing Vernon. His small frame next to Connors created an instant contrast that viewers remembered. The story pulled Vernon through manipulation, fear, revenge, and a final downfall that left him wounded and forever changed. When the pilot returned in edited form as the series opener on September 30, 1958, audiences met characters who felt morelier than the average TV Western. They saw a town built on pressure and corruption and watched Lucas stand between violence and justice in a way that promised more to come. Yet, the show nearly took a different road. Peckinpah's original ending didn't lift the hero. In that first draft, Lucas had no son and walked away in defeat because the threats against him were too heavy to fight. He lost deliberately, swallowed his pride and faded out off-town. It was bleak and honest in that raw Peckinpah way. But director Arnold Lavin pushed for something that could hold an audience's heart. And adding a child gave Lucas a reason to fight, bend, sacrifice, and then rise again. Pekin rewrote everything, giving McCain a moment of reluctant heroism that became the series' entire rhythm. Lucas wanted peace, yet violence always found him, and he stepped into it only when his son or community needed him. that shift made the show survive and turned it into something families watched together. Casting brought its own set of battles. Johnny Crawford was only 12 in 1958 when he stepped into the audition room, carrying experience from being one of the original Mouseketeers when he was only 9. Hundreds of boys wanted the role of Mark McCain. But Crawford walked in with calmness and skill the camera loved. When The Sharpshooter aired in March 1958, he hadn't just won a role. He had anchored a father-son partnership that helped AB choose the series for its fall lineup. His work was so strong that it would eventually earn him an Emmy nomination at age 13. Chuck Connors nearly missed it all because he turned the offer down at first. The salary didn't match what he felt the role required. Producers panicked, talked to James Whitmore, and even considered John Anderson. Connors, 37 at the time, and already known from films like Old Yeller, had leverage and wasn't willing to accept less. During this tense period, everyone wondered who would lead the show. Everything shifted when Connors read with Crawford. Something clicked in the room and the producers saw it immediately. They raised the offer. Connors accepted and it became the best financial decision he could have made since he negotiated a profit share that paid him well throughout all 168 episodes. Even with all that chemistry, Crawford admitted later that he started out terrified. Connors had a reputation for being demanding, intense, and serious about his craft. Crawford remembered watching Connors play first base for the Los Angeles Angels and admired him long before he ever met him. Standing beside a man he had idolized made his nerves worse. He worried he would not be good enough or strong enough for the emotional scenes the story required. But something unexpected happened on set. Connors noticed the boy's fear and eased into the role of mentor before the cameras even rolled. Baseball bridged the gap. Connors had played 67 Major League games, including one with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1949 and 66 with the Chicago Cubs in 1951. He hit 238 with 2 home runs and carried the confidence of an athlete who had already lived a fully formed life before acting. Crawford loved the sport, too. So, they slipped into conversations about players, stats, and stories. Connors brought him to games for free and helped him relax into the father-son connection the show needed. Their friendship became the hidden engine behind every scene they filmed. When ABC finally put The Rifleman on the air on September 30, 1958, no one expected it to explode the way it did. The show shot to the number 4 spot in the Nielsen ratings with a massive 33.1 rating. ABC had been struggling, but this show gave the network a serious push. Connors earned $3,000 per episode, which would bear on $33,000 today. And the combination of violence, heart, and depth made the series stand out in a landscape full of westerns. It felt different. The genre dominated television, but The Rifleman did something personal within that world, and people kept coming back for it. Connors never again reached this level of ratings in his later projects, which makes this series even more defining for him. Even the music had a fight behind it. Herschel Burke Gilbert composed a bold, pounding theme that executives thought sounded too violent for the times. They worried parents would complain and some did, saying the show felt too aggressive for family viewing, but test audiences loved the theme and Arnold Lavin pushed hard to keep it. The music eventually became one of the most recognizable sounds of its era and helped shape the emotional rhythm of each episode. Across 5 seasons and exactly 168 episodes, the show built a legacy that stretched long after it ended on April 8, 1963. The early years brought high ratings, but by 1961, the show had slipped to number 27, tying with The Price is Right. The drop contributed to its cancellation, but it didn't weaken the impact it left on television. Crawford and Connors walked away as household names. Crawford's Emmy nomination at 13 placed him beside adult actors who had been in the business for decades. Connors became the face of a Western hero who could deliver justice without losing his humanity. ABC even changed its early plans after seeing their chemistry, proving how much the father-son energy mattered. Sam Peckinpah came into television with a vision that never quite fit the box he was given. He first wrote The Sharpshooter as a script for Gunsmoke, believing the Western should feel raw and honest, the way life actually was on the frontier. CBS executives disagreed and rejected it, saying the violence and moral darkness clashed with their idea of order and comfort. The script eventually found a home on Zane Gay Theatre on March 7, 1958, and only later became the pilot for The Rifleman when it aired on ABC on September 30, 1958. Peckinpah pulled ideas from his own childhood on his grandfather's ranch, aiming for realism rather than nostalgia. That approach immediately worried Four-Star Productions and producers Jules Levy, Arthur Gardner, and Arnold Lavin, who wanted something families could sit through without discomfort. As the 1958 and 1959 season unfolded, Picker wrote and directed episodes like The Sharpshooter, Home Ranch, The Marshal, and The Money Gun. Each one pushed boundaries with beatings, burned homes, and moral choices that felt unresolved. Network executives grew uneasy and repeatedly demanded softer endings and fewer hard edges. But Peckinpah resisted, believing the truth should not be diluted. That resistance carried directly into how he viewed Mark McCain. Peckinpah did not believe a boy growing up on the frontier could be raised on gentle lessons and polite conversations. In his original idea, Lucas McCain was distant and emotionally guarded, a man shaped by violence rather than comfort. In Home Ranch, which aired on October 7, 1958, Mark watches his father beaten and dragged by ranch hands, then sees their home set on fire. Peckinpah insisted these moments mattered because they showed what survival really cost. The producers pushed back, wanting Lucas to explain things calmly and reassure his son with words instead of trauma. Peckinpah fought them at every turn, arguing that frontier life did not offer soft explanations. The tension never eased, and week by week it became harder for anyone involved to pretend the collaboration could last. Violence itself was another breaking point. Arnold Lavin later said Pimp's episodes carried an intensity that made people uneasy. Death on his sets did not happen quickly or cleanly.